start. Click through the screens you've seen a zillion times by now. So let me introduce myself. I am Quentin, or Q, Alldredge. I go by Q for both the Star Trek and James Bond references. So feel free to call me Q. I wear two hats. I am a full-time civil servant with the U.S. Air Force, and officially they are paying my way here and paying for my time, so I'm actually on the clock with them. But this presentation is not endorsed by them. I did this presentation all on my own as part of Q Software Innovations. I'm a LabVIEW architect and a newly minted LabVIEW champion. Thank you. And as part of Hill Air Force Base, we're also a LabVIEW Center of Excellence. So here's my contact information. I'll put this up at the end again, but just so you know who I am, a lot of people go by their forum names. I'm the Q on the forums and the Q on Lava, and that's my avatar right there, the LabVIEW religious zealot, I guess. So the very long name of this presentation is Extensible and Modular User Interfaces, Extending the BI Server with Object-Oriented Techniques. The short name is, this is the way you get rid of X controls. All right? So I'm going to go over some definitions and then give you some background and my goals. I'm going to talk about what a Q control is and why it's better than an X control. Talk about the VI server, control classes, and then we are going to make one together today. So some quick definitions. A skin I'm defining as just the appearance of the UI. This toolkit does not need any specific skin associated with any of the controls, and I'll explain that in a little bit. What this toolkit is mainly for is for the UI logic. It is going to help you encapsulate your UI logic so that you can use that logic in multiple places with multiple skins without muddying up your business logic, which is everything else important that your application does. Everything that your customer wants the application to do. So some background, this is why I was doing the sound check. I've got my own movie trailer, all right? So give me just one moment here. In a world, a team was assembled to start an epic LabVIEW journey. The program requirements consisted of a client running on a touchscreen tablet and a server running on a PXI controller. It was built with object-oriented techniques, actor framework, and X controls. It had over 50 modules across as many projects. The touchscreen UI required special controls big enough to use with gloves on. Much of these were handled with X controls to keep the UI consistent across all the modules. Then came the dilemma. It took almost 2 hours to build, even if it had completed building. When it wouldn't build, it was hard to know what module was the culprit. The decision was made. The only path to success was to split the program into incremental builds with PPLs. The team was already having problems with touchscreen UI elements created with X controls. But when PPLs were introduced, all heck broke loose. Again, a difficult choice was made. All X controls must be removed. How will the team remove all the X controls while still fulfilling the touchscreen requirements and keep the UI consistent, while at the same time being able to reuse the UI code in the process? There you go. Is that a movie you want to see? Well, you know, not the people I submitted the script to, but... So my goal was, again, the background was we were creating a touchscreen user interface where the user, it was for the Air Force, needed to be able to touch it with gloves on in 0-degree weather or whatever when they're out on the flight line. So we started off using X controls, but as you will find out in my presentation, things went really bad, and you got a nice Mormon swear in there for saying heck, so. So my goal was to separate the UI from the business logic so that we could reuse it. I needed to be able to change the skin. So for in this case, I wanted the skins to be usable for a touch screen, very big buttons, very large scroll bars, that sort of thing. And I wanted something you don't get in X controls is to be able to inherit the control properties and methods. So what is a cube control? In a nutshell, a cube control is a LabVIEW class that has a reference to the control in its private data. That's basically it. But what you get from that is, and as part of my toolkit, what you get for free is you can use all of the properties and methods that are built in. And you do all your manipulation of that control through those properties and methods. You can also reuse the UI logic wherever it's required. There's an asynchronous event handler to handle all the events. Just like in an X control, they have the facade with the event handler in it. There's something similar to that. So why not use an X control? So, like I said, X controls are good at separating the UI logic, encapsulating it. You can create custom properties and methods. But what you don't get is you don't inherit all of the properties and methods from the VI server that already exist. You can't separate the UI logic from the skin. So if you want to say an X control that is silver and you need one that's now modern, you'd have to have two separate X controls for that. It's also extensible. So let's say you create a cool control that does something like a someone was mentioning a multi-column list box that resizes its columns, and now you want to also implement sorting. You could just extend from one class to the other using inheritance to extend the capabilities. Then also, it can be used with all the modern architectures, libraries, PPLs, actor framework, object-oriented, all of that sort of thing, where X controls get crashy and unstable. So here's my fundamental problems with X controls. And as some of you know, Darren called me the X control zealot yesterday, and I said, nope, not anymore. And it was because of the problems we were having with that project. The fundamental problem with X controls is that they run all the time. And because they run all the time, the load and unload behavior is not consistent. If you're just using a regular VI, then yeah, when you drop it or when the VI loads, then the X control loads. When the VI leaves memory or you delete the X control, then the uninit happens. But when it's in a library or when that VI is in a library, then it gets confusing. Basically, it loads when the library loads and it unloads when the library unloads, which means it's not happening when you expect it to happen. And we had problems where essentially the program was supposed to close and there was something hanging it because there was something still running. And that was the X controls most of the time. Also, it's difficult to handle during edit time because it's always running. If you want specific edit time behavior, you have to program all of that edit time behavior. Excuse me. So, the VI server class hierarchy. How many of you familiar with the VI server? Yeah, all of you mostly. Are you aware that it's arranged into classes? Yeah. So there's the classes that you see from generic G-object control and then all of the controls that you can manipulate. And then the properties are arranged likewise. You have generic G-object properties, you have control properties, and numeric properties that are all arranged hierarchically as well. But if you wanted to use these in an X control, you would have to program every single one of those over and have a new property or a new method bringing those over. So the Cube Control Toolkit, I recreated the entire class hierarchy for you. All 72-ish classes.
Did you do that programmatically?
I did it scripting.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I also gave you all properties and methods that are available in runtime. So over 1,500 EIs were created in this script. But what that gives you is, because you have the opportunity to plug a class right into a property node, now you can see the hierarchy of properties and use them just like you see it in the BI server. Also with methods, all of the methods are there too. Unfortunately, there's no invoke node that you can plug a class into. So the best way to find those is use MGI's class method browser, is what I would suggest, to find all the methods available.
Did you also include the super secret special private stuff?
I didn't. Only the stuff available in runtime. So someone mentioned the other day that, okay, you turn on scripting, none of the scripting stuff works in runtime. That's not entirely true. There are some scripting properties and methods that work in the runtime engine. And to see that, you basically have to go into the help and see, does this work in runtime? And it will say yes or no. And so all of the scripting methods that would be available in runtime are also available. So most of those are like read type things, like read the master bounds, or I can't think of any others right now, but so for example.
Can you clarify that a little bit further? So this very few scripting ones are in there. There's the super secret stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's scripting, which is no longer underneath that super secret.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah, so it's only the blue scripting stuff that would be available in ways of turning scripting on that is available in runtime that's reproduced in this toolkit. Okay. So how do you create a queue control? First off, you go to the tools network and you download it. Then afterwards, you know what? You're supposed to be able to just do a search for queue controls, but their search doesn't work. So I have a link. I'll give you the direct link to it. The best way to find it, because their search doesn't work for my page or whatever on the tools network, is there is a community page that I have a link from there to it, where you go to my website. But I also have these. So you can come get these afterwards. Handout cards will tell you where to find it and how to get to it and where to get more support. Also, when it installs with some examples so that you can go on there and find out how to use it. That is also in the help. If you go to help, Queue Control Toolkit, or QSI and Queue Control Toolkit help, it will launch a PDF that will give you a whole bunch of background information, and even gives you more information on why the X controls don't work. And it will give you a big long getting started, like the Hello World version of a queue control. Yes?
I just searched on the tools network, and you're right, it doesn't show up, but if you search on the NI.com search, it does pull it up.
Okay, good.
So NI.com, Google.
Google also pulls it up. Good. Yeah. So don't use, like if you're on the tools network and you try to use their search, it doesn't find it. Use NI.com search or just Google Queue Controls LabVIEW and you'll find it. I also have a website for Queue Software Innovations that has a link to it. I also have the community page and a blog, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. So creating a new one, when you install it, it integrates into the new dialog box. So you should have a queue control as part of your new that you can then select. And it will start up the queue control wizard that will step you through the initialization. So let's go ahead and do that.
Get into the project new as well?
Yeah, it's in the project new. So here I have an example project. I go into file. Or what do you mean by project new?
Like
this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows up right there. We'll hit OK. Now, sometimes this wizard takes a long time to load up. And The reason why is not my fault. It's somewhere on the back end how the plugin for NI for creating wizards and how those get launched takes a long time. I benchmarked it. It's not my initialization at all. So that was what it might be. It might be compiling, because I originally wrote this in LabVIEW 2015, and that's what I released it in. This is LabVIEw 2015. So maybe, yeah, maybe if you're open it the first time, it's compiling into 2017 or whatever you're using. It makes it slow. But there are actually some view control examples in the wizard itself. You can see up here I have a tab control that's all grayed out. There's a queue control that ships with the toolkit that's called steps that handles this behavior. If you want to do a wizard with a tab control where they're grayed out except for the step you're on, then there's something for that. There's also a queue control that ships with it that handles selection. There's actually 3 of them. This one is the single selection, which basically makes it so that you can only select one item at a time. This is where you select what do you want to start from, who do you want to inherit from. For my example today, I'm going to inherit from the string control. Yes?
Could you give a clue what kind of control you're making so we can understand
Definitely.
why you're doing it from the string?
That's what I was about to say. You good lead in. So how many of you have had a customer that wants to do text entry, but wants to make sure that the text is spelled correctly? Yeah? How many wish you could have a string control that would spell check? How many wish you'd have a string control that could spell check live and actually highlight words, just like Word does when you've got something spelled wrong? That's what we're making today.
Now we understand why.
Yeah, that's why it's a string. So I'm going to call this, oops.
It's not working there, huh?
No, I don't have it in this one. This is something new before the wizard came out.
Made it, that's how it's going to be in there.
Okay. String. And this you can put in the documentation, which I should do. Doc. Okay. And then it comes onto the banner. You can change this. Basically, it says you can only have 6 characters across for your banner. And you can see that the data type, the color of this class, matches the color of references. So that's by design, so that you know that this is now a control reference class, basically. And then you can pick where you want to save it. And you can save these anywhere. The toolkit gets installed in the vi.lib folder. But after you have that toolkit installed, the inheritance will be able to find that. So you can save yours wherever you need to save them. So I'm just going to have it saved in the same folder as my example project. It's going to create a subfolder for it. I'm going to hit create. Now before I hit create, there's another queue control that you're going to see as it's creating. That's called status history. That's basically just another string control that's going to scroll through the history, and you're going to see it look like it fades out and disappears. And that's another one that ships with. So now it's finished.
Wait, are you Star Trek or Star Wars?
So there's my class, and it creates it from a template. It's got everything, the basics in there that you need. I'm going to sit down for a moment and talk you through these. This one is a constructor of sorts, as much as you can have constructors in LabVIEW. The input to this is your reference, and then this is your close, of course. Now in the class, it starts up and puts in 2 things: the reference to the control type you want, and this state data DVR reference. And the reason why you have to do your state data this way, think of this as your state data like your X-control state data. You define it in here on state data definition. You can put anything in there that you need. And the reason why it's in a DVR is because you're going to have all these properties running in one thread, and you're going to have the asynchronous event handler happening in another, and they need to have the updated state. So that's how they stay in sync. A lot of these other VIs that you get in here are given to you, like the load state data and close state data. Those happen in the new and close. If you need some initialization of your control, you can come in here and add your initialization code as needed. Likewise on the close, if you need to do some cleanup, you put your cleanup code there. You can see all of these call parent, and by nature, that's how it ends up going up the calling chain and calling to launch your asynchronous event handler. Now, yep, those are all must call parent. And same with this load reference. If you need to override this load reference, then you can go ahead and do that. But the reference has to get called, passed up, and that's for operating on those property nodes. So now you're wondering, okay, well, where's the event handler? Right here. So there's your event handler. You basically dynamically register for all of your events in this way. And then you add all your UI logic into this event handler. Any questions so far? Yes?
So this raises a really interesting possibility for transition from LabVIEW to LabVIEW NXG. I know that there's a lot of VI server that's going to be changing between the two environments. You've abstracted all that behind classes. So my question for you is, do you intend on implementing the new VI server methods in NXG classes so that our code doesn't have to change?
Eventually. Yeah.
Too long.
It's
That's going to save so much time.
It is uncertain what that's going to look like right now, so I don't know. But what I can answer is there's a better likelihood of Q controls working in NXG than X controls working in NXG. So you're more likely to, you're going to be more successful, or let's see, potentially successful using Q controls over X controls for being able to upgrade NXG. So, like a television show cook, there's all the ingredients, and I just mixed them all together for you. Now I'm going to pull the actual one out of the oven. Because there is a lot of code behind this that I wouldn't be able to do live. But suffice it to say, here's my event handler. And I've registered for the events, key down, shortcut activation, shortcut menu selection, and value change. And I have events for each of those in my event handler with sub-VIs that do different things. Like for the key down, it's going to run to get all of the misspellings from my spell check engine. And my spell check engine's in there. And it is a 100% LabVIEW implemented spell check engine. So that is a presentation I submitted for CLA Summit Next, is how I did the spell check engine. But that's not what I'm going to cover here. So, but short note, the spell check engine, as part of the constructor of the new, you can specify a dictionary class. And so if you want me to talk more about my spell check engine, hit those people up that are deciding what the presentations are and let them know that you want to see that. So, and then we can talk about it. I've even programmed.
Is there a default dictionary?
The default dictionary is just a standard English dictionary, and I think it tries, well, I think the path that I have points to the LabVIEW data folder, so there's something that needs to be installed that way. But the dictionary, you can change the path. That's one of the overridable methods. I created a Klingon dictionary for it as well, because, you know, have to do that. Yes, you can add words to the dictionary. Oops, I need to close that. And I'll show that in just a moment. So, going back into this, let's see, what else do I need to show? I showed the constructor. Oh, let's show basically how to use the thing. Okay, you've created the thing. This is now our application with the string in it. And now, this is all my code right now to run the thing. I have the reference going into my constructor. Like I said, I didn't wire a dictionary, so the dictionary is the default one. And then I have a close. Now, the way that you would handle these in your application is just like you would handle passing around this wire, you would then pass around this wire instead. So in your initialization of your application, you would do that. And then this could be bundled into your actor. It could be bundled into your state data or whatever you use to pass around to then manipulate your UI. So now let's run this. And let's do hello world. Okay, obviously I spelled those wrong. Actually, I probably spelled this one too wrong. But we'll find out. Yeah, I spelled that one too wrong. All right. There we go. Hello and world. There we go. So now you have a customer that says, you know what? I want you to implement this using a silver control instead. All right, well, just, go in here and say place and say, okay, let's see, we want the silver string control. All right, let's delete that and let's come back in here and say, hello world. All right, and then it just works. It doesn't care what string it is, because as long as it's string data type going in there, it's happy with that. Alrighty, let's see. We were asking about how to add something. All right, well, I purposely... Oh, you have a question?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I have this lovely control. I think you said, but I didn't quite catch it. How do I get the string out? I'm in my program. I want to use the string. I have to have that wire, right? And then,
Yes. So you're saying you want to read the value of the string out?
yeah.
So, okay, that might be a little bit fishy on this, but we'll show you. The problem is because of just the way you have to implement this, yeah, you get every single property given to you, but value obviously doesn't give you the actual data type. It only gives you a variant, so you would have to then unflatten or cast to the string.
You can still use the terminal to get the value, or local.
You could still use the terminal or local to get the value. Yeah. There is another string control add-on I made. Yeah, you could. Yeah. That was one thing that you could look into doing now that I didn't have before when I created this, because I created it in 2015.
What was the question?
A valuable VI.
So the question at first was, how do I get the value of the string out? And then I showed that it was a variant. Some people were giving me suggestions of, okay, well, how could we make it so that it actually gave you the right data type out? And malleable VIs was an option, and would be an option. Another option is, because I wanted this to be extensible, every single property and every single method is overridable. So if you say you wanted to override the blinking property node for your control, you could create a new write and read blinking and have it do whatever you needed to do.
Are you still able to register for value change in the event structure, and that would have the new value?
Yes.
I mean, you're still able to. And so if you had two of these, would you then have to concatenate those event registrations into the dynamic event? Like you had two.
These aren't event registrations. This is treat these just like a reference wire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Have you thought of or prototype the concept of also making the events extensible?
Not entirely the events, but one of the examples that ships with it is the tree selectors. Okay, and there's 3 different types of tree selectors that implement the checkboxes. And actually, I'm going to show one of them as an example here in just a moment. And the way that I did that one is I have a parent tree selector control that implements some of the checkbox functionality, like just turning on the symbols and such. And then there's a VI in there called toggle checkbox. Then I inherit from that, and then I don't have any other event handlers. All of the children that I inherit from that one, I deleted the event handler out. So there's only one event handler that gets launched. But then I override that toggle checkbox to do different behavior for the different checking, for hierarchical checking or single selection check boxes or anything like that. And so let me show you the... Oh, yes, Christian.
So if I have a front panel and want 4 of those strings, I would just duplicate that entire tray there?
Yes, you would just have 4 of those constructors.
Okay. And the other thing, so if I now spell check, for example, right click, is that a value change?
The spell check, is it a value change? I think so. I'm not 100% sure. Let's find out.
It also depends if it's update value and type.
Let's find out. Let's see. Let's add. Now, this is not part of anything planned, so this is, who knows how this will go. Let's see. Let's say new value, create indicator. Now, I want to make sure that my references don't get lost, so I need to wire this across. Let's see. Let's make this big.
So then why is by reference, so we don't need the shift register?
Because it's all by reference, you don't need a shift register here. But you do need to make it across. So, oh, I actually have it, I remember right, I actually had to have it update while typing in order to have it spell check live. So you can see it's actually doing that. Okay, now the question was, though, if you update an event and say I want to change it, does it change? And there you go. Okay. So it does do the value change event there.
But that's your own code, so you can make that.
Yeah. The event, I mean, what happens in the event handler, you could have a value, tell it to do a value signaling when something happens and cause it to do a value change event.
And of course, if that was the output of your thing, and you didn't want to see that,
Yep. Another question? Back there first.
One thing that you can do with X controls is encapsulate several things, several controls at once, and then manage multiple references. Is that something that is capable of Q controls, or would you suggest doing that through subpanel?
It becomes more difficult. So if you saw Darren's presentation before mine with Panel Manager, then that starts to blend into that area. But I have done multiple controls, and the way that I do it is I pack them all into a cluster and then use the cluster control. And then in the load event or the load reference VI, I then split those out so that I know all of the controls that are in my cluster. And I have some examples of those that you can see. Yeah. Oh, actually, I think Norm had his hand up first, Chris.
Yes, you've been running this and stopping it appropriately each time. You've got something asynchronous running in the background.
Yes.
I presume if you have a board, it handles that well?
If you, exactly, yeah. If it becomes orphaned, there's some things checking in the background and it will shut down appropriately. Obviously, it is better to use the close.
How, yeah, that's, I guess that Damon grade shutdown, what is your delay on that? You gotta,
I think it's pretty quick because essentially under the hood, you can, all of it's open source, you can go look at it. But under the hood, I start up a queue and I keep that queue, and if that queue goes dead, then it knows, okay, I've been orphaned, and it shuts down.
What is it? Is it a dynamic VI that you start, or is it callback VIs, or?
Basically, it's dynamic VIs. It's a dynamic VI under the hood. Yes?
Over the table topic.
Okay.
As LabVIEW revs and server potentially changes, are you creating different versions of your library to match the version of LabVIEw?
Right now, no. So if there's new property nodes in LabVIEW 2016, 2017, I don't have them implemented. If there's a good way to do that and distribute it, I'd like to hear. But right now, the only things I have exposed is LabVIEW 2015, available stuff.
Notice when you have 3 or 4 separate, you have one branch of your code for each version of LabVIEW,
Yeah.
updating and building all of it.
Now, there might be, if I can make my scripts run better, that created the things in the first place, and it would be able to start up and say, okay, I'm in this version of LabVIEW, and go script the missing ones for you. That would be cool, but that doesn't do that right now. Okay. Yeah, feature request. All right, I'm going to delete this out. Delete this event case. Now I'm going to show you how easy it is to add a new one, all right? So I'm going to I have a tree control here that the only reason why I have it here is because I don't want to spend the time to populate it with some data. So I'm just going to copy this over with some data already in it. And then I'm going to go to my block diagram. And down in the add-ons, what gets installed with this is the cube controls that I ship with the toolkit. And so I'm going to do a new selection hierarchical tree. And then I'm going to get a reference to my tree. Wire that in. Pass that through, and then I'm going to get the close. Close. And now when I run this,
Why do you have a coercion dot?
because of the data type of the tree being scalar versus array or multi-select, it's the selection scheme of the tree. So you can see I have this implemented where it does the mixed data type if it's mixed and handles all of the hierarchical toggling for you. How many programmed that before? How many programmed it multiple times? Well, now you can get it for free. So, and let's say we changed our mind. Let's say we want to replace this, and let's replace it with the single one. So I'm going to add single here. This is going to break. These aren't dynamic dispatch that opens and closes, so you have to change those.
Is there a reason or not that reason?
Because I wanted them to break if you wired the wrong control reference into it. And well, actually, the reason why they're not dynamic dispatch is because you can't have different references wired on the connector pane. The close doesn't matter. I guess the close could be. I didn't think of that. But you could have cleanup code that's specific to your version. Actually, yeah. The cleanup code is in there to clean up your version, so it has to be. So the reason why, the question was, why didn't you use a generic reference and then cast it inside? I found that to be incredibly slow, especially when you started doing a whole list of properties. It was having to do a cast in each one of those, and it was just, yeah, time consuming. So let's see, I need to replace this one. So let's see, now I lost my train of thought. Which one did I do? I think I did the single selection, right? Yep, okay. Now we'll run it. There you go. Now I've implemented with just single selection. So, alrighty, question?
Yeah, one of the things you just talked about in terms of speed, how much have you beaten up on this in terms of like how many of simple ones that you've got flying memory and other kind of the impact of a lot of them?
So a stress test. You know, maybe not an extensive stress test. I haven't done a lot of that. I have had where there's maybe 5 or 6 running at once, but maybe not more than that.
Do you have a separate daemon for control?
Yes. Every single control has its own running event handler, just like an X control would, really. Any other questions? Way back in the back.
Does it matter, or is it going to hurt anything if you mix using the class wire to properties or calling the methods and do your own properties directly from the reference or your own event handling mixed up together?
You can, but be careful. Nothing stops you. So the question, can you do your own event handling or your own wire things to the property node of the actual reference wire versus the class and have them both going? Yes, but keep in mind, if you override like a property and you're changing some state data because of that property, then if you wire the reference wire into just a property, obviously you're not going to get that property to begin with, but it might not update the state data the correct way. So.
You expose the reference to control through a property node on your class. Like if I wanted to get the reference to my control to access some super secret special private stuff that you can expose.
Yeah.
Could I?
I don't right now. Right now I use it as hey, it's encapsulated after I pass it in. I don't want anything else to be able to manipulate that control except for me. But obviously I don't stop you. So, because you could branch the reference. And you could branch the class wire too. So, all right. All right, so I showed you how easy it was to create a new one. Let's see, we're going back to the presentation now. So, in summary, this is the first of two summaries actually. So, in summary of the demo, to create a new queue controller, you start with the wizard, going to new and queue control, and then you modify the state data if you need to. You don't necessarily have to. Then you add UI logic to the event handler, add any properties or methods that you want to add. Now, creating a property is just as easy as creating an accessor, but instead of just having a read or write in there, you have to do other stuff. There's no reason to not have to do other stuff. And then you can then use it in your application. So how many of you were here last hour? Saw Derek's presentation on Panel Manager. So the queue controls and Panel Manager aren't competing technologies. You can use them together. Use queue controls when you want to make a more rich control, or if you want to extend the VI server. Use Panel Manager if you want to manipulate where your panel shows up. But likewise, like you asked, you could use a panel that has multiple controls on it to make an X-control-like thing. But that's the trade-off, and you could use queue controls for that too. So, but you can use them together. You can use queue controls in panels, and so I have kind of a schematic here where I have a top-level VI. And in it, I have one queue control running, and then I have two sub-panels. And in one sub-panel, I have another queue control running, and in the second sub-panel, I have another queue control running. And so it looks like that, where I have a bar across the top, and then I have two different things going on here. So let me show you that. I actually have that. And I think in this case, I used the panel actors to do this. Let me make sure. Yeah, they're the panel actors I used to do this. So here's my top level VI. There's queue control 1, there's sub-panel 1, sub-panel 2. And panel 1. There's panel 1. So there's my code for panel 1 with the constructor, and it's going, my queue control reference is going into there, or my queue control class, rather. And then panel 2, there's the code for panel 2. And so then I come into my launcher, and I launch this. And there is my thing running. Now this top one is a Q control I wrote based off of someone's question on the community that they wanted to have a way to order an array other than, say, putting it in a list box and doing drag and drop within a list box. They wanted big buttons and wanted to be able to move around. So I implemented a Q control to do that as a picture control. So this is actually a picture control, and I can drag these things around. And then I have it sending a message updating this list saying what order am I in. So I move that around, and things just move around accordingly. So I know that there was a question. What's that? This one's not a shipping example, but I'll show you where all the rest of mine are, because I share all of the ones I've created so far. And then I have the checkbox one working here, and I have the hierarchical checkbox working here. And they're all in different panels in Panel Manager. So, a couple of questions I'm sure you're wondering is, okay, there's where you get more information. And if you want a card, come get one, and it has the same information on it. And also gives you gives you the brief overview.
The earlier session, John had asked about multi-column list boxes, maintaining number of columns and all of that. This obviously gives you a way to do that, but it still solves the problem of sometimes the jitter or the flash when you're doing the resizing or delay, panel size. Does this help in any of that?
Well, I guess the only suggestion I have for that is
Could you repeat the question?
okay. The question is, there was a question in the last hour about keeping the number of columns visible and resizing columns in a multi-column list box. Obviously, this can help you because you could register for a panel size event and have it do that. But he said that the problem is with doing that now is it flashes as it's moving those things around. The suggestion I have for that is to defer panel updates. So one of the properties that you can get from all of these, so when you're in the event handler, you can get the property for like who owns me or what VI owns me, and then you can purposely defer panel updates. Now, be careful, that might affect other things, but
Because one I've seen a lot is when you resize the entire window, your multi-column list box will sometimes lag behind and set the panel size.
So another trick for that is on the panel size event, you get a new and an old. The last event that will fire when you're resizing, it will equal. So you wait until it equals, and then you do it. And then you do the resize. When they don't equal, then you don't do it. And you just
maximize or minimize, or they distort.
Yeah. So that's another way around it. I mean, still you're going to resize and it's going to be blank until you let go, and then it's going to go. I don't think there's any way around it at that point. See in the back, and then.
That's a great tip, and my question was going to be, is there anything you've learned from doing this to help with panel resizing with multiple controls that depend a lot on each other?
So panel resizing, use splitters a lot. And try to only use one control per pane, if you can.
I have flexible UI scaling, I will be talking about that at GDevCon.
So we had someone up here say at GDevCon he's going to do a presentation on flexible resizing.
So, yeah, also dynamic panes.
And dynamic panes. So I don't know if that's available to you to go to GDevCon and see WeBuzz, but
I think GDevCon will also give things.
and okay, they'll probably post the videos afterwards. So for those of us that are locked on the side of the pond.
I was curious, when let's say you're doing the capture pane size event, and you do want to redraw your control to adjust the size in code, where do you capture the pane size? Are you capturing the pane size event in your main UI, and then inside that event you call a method on your Q control to then tell, okay, pane size happened here, and you go resize to the pane? Or is there some way to pass pane down into the
Yes.
control and have it?
So, so the answer is yes. You can do it either way. So the question is, okay, we have a pane resize. Do you capture the pane resize event in your main application and then operate on a method to cause the resize to happen? Or is there a way to capture the pane resize in your queue control event handler? And I think I would capture it in the queue control event handler. And the way that you do it is there is a property that is exposed that will give you the reference to the pane that your control is in. And you just do that on the outside. You can either have it break that other reference up in the load reference VI, where you override that. You would just have your pane reference in your class private data, and then you would package it in there. Or you could do it in your event handler and say, okay, I've got the reference to the control, give me the pane, and then register that pane size dynamically, just as if you would register the controls dynamically. So right there where you're registering all of the events dynamically for the control, register one for pane size on the reference to the pane, not to the reference to the control.
So you have your queue control would be registering for the pane size of your main UI. And your main UIs would also be registered for the pane
So
size.
they'll both fire as long as you don't filter it. If you filter it and you tell it to ignore, because I think there's a pane size filter, am I right?
But you usually want to...
Maybe I'm wrong.
You want to discard
But
old events. That kind of a resize. You don't want to get a million of them firing. You really want the most...
So you can have, I know it's a faux pas to have multiple event handlers and stuff like that. You can have multiple event handlers as long as they each have their own registration. You can't split a registration. You can split a reference, create a registration for a dynamic event, and then have an event handler, and all of them can have their own thing going on.
So the initialization of the queue control is where you would register for the pane that it lives in.
And then when the event handler starts, you would pass it and register for the actual event.
Softball question.
Okay.
Did you transfer the VI documentation for the properties that you know what property is?
Yes.
Good.
So when you highlight over a property node with the question was, did I transfer the documentation? Like if you highlight over a property, does it show the documentation? And the answer is yes. If you highlight over a property that has a queue control wired into it, it gives a little bit more. It says, this is a wrapper from the queue control toolkit around this property that does blah. And it basically just copied the text from the actual property over. So I had to mine the help files for that. Don't tell anyone. Yeah. Basically, I turned all the help files back into HTML and mined them. Okay. So what's next? I have a blog out there, which was the last link, and I have several queue controls that I've created so far. I have a rich text box queue control. Have you ever wanted a rich text box in LabVIEW? Totally implemented in LabVIEW? Basically, it lets you do fonts, colors, size of font. It lets you do justification, but that's the whole string because that's all there is in LabVIEw.
UTF-16 or anything?
No, only ASCII at this point.
How about
Fit to size.
in other words, I have a text, I want to control fit.
So you want to blow up the font size until
No,
it fits.
I want to adapt to the font.
Okay. So I don't have it do that, but you can create one.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I will.
yeah.
I know how to do it.
Yeah, so create one to do that. And just like Derek said about the community, let's share these. Now, I don't have a good way to share them. If you want to share them, we need to figure that out together as a community. Right now, I do have a blog, so you can submit them to me, and I can publish them on there.
Darren said that he knows the guy who lives
All the URLs. Actually, what I need is a new community
there.
page. I need a new community page for queue controls that you guys can submit on. If you know the community person, maybe you can let him or her know. Okay, because that would be a good way to do it. Right now, there is, I have a thread on the UI interest group. That's probably the best place to ask questions if you have questions about how to use these or what you want to do. If you have a question that you don't want everyone to know, then feel free to email me. I have my cards up here and handout cards. As far as the other Q controls that I've created, there's probably a couple more on here that I haven't listed that is in the blog. And so all the ones that I've created are in the blog. Some of the cool ones, like I said, the rich text box. The spell check one will be out there shortly once I can go home and do that. So.
Distribute one package of Q control, so I'm guessing you have like a base package, and then you have subsequent BI packages for the extension?
For the extensions, I just am doing them as source distribution. They're just zip files.
Okay.
Because you can put them anywhere once you have the toolkit installed.
So as long as you're scripting this kind of stuff, it would be convenient for me to have, don't you have to put all the, let's say you have to change 40 properties, then you have to put 40 guys next to each other.
No, if you want to operate properties, you can wire the class into the property node and put all the properties down. Unfortunately, there isn't
But I
that
don't want
for...
to do that. What I want to do is get that from text power. So what would be needed, you have a BI that string which property you want to change and tell you. So you have a script.
So you need some more scripting being able to change what property is selected?
I think for
Once passing the Q value pair of change publish properties.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's a classic problem for us.
Yeah.
so what you want to do is do that.
I don't know if this is the tool to do that. I am working on another tool. In every other programming language, when you're working with UI, you have that little table on the side that gives you all of the properties of everything you have selected and what value they are, and you can edit that, a little property browser. I'm creating that. I'm working on creating that. And I actually had to create a Q control to help me with that, because there's a breadcrumb trail thing in there, and so there's a breadcrumb trail Q control. But yeah, I'm working on that, and it will make it so that you can select on stuff and see all of the
Eventually, what I would like is having other languages is a dialogue resource. And then have the XML create your UI. If your program uses silk controls, it will use silk controls.
Okay.
And then you solve the whole inheritance problem in the library.
So I don't know, like I said, this isn't the tool for that, but...
So I think it is. It just needs, or I need to make things BIs.
Let's talk, maybe we can do that. Make something for that. I guess we're out of time, aren't we? So go check it out. If you need to talk more with me, that's fine. I'm going to be around the rest of the day. I'm not flying out till tomorrow, so we can meet. Come get a card, come get a pass along card.